But in this instance, the government will be putting on an extra cost on food when South Africans are experiencing, as you said, double-digit food inflation.
New regulations are going to infringe on your consumer rights. Joining me to discuss is the FMF's legal researcher, Zakhele Mthembu. So, Zakes, you've been doing quite a lot of research and recently made a submission to Parliament about a new law which is going to infringe on consumer rights. Could you tell our FMF audience about this law and what its implications are?
The Department of Health, about 2 months ago, released, regulations relating to the labeling and advertising of foodstuffs. As you would know, when you buy food, it usually has, nutritional information displayed on it. So that nutritional information is mandated legislatively to be displayed there by the Department of Health and, for various reasons. Then the reasons for the passing of these regulations, for the new regulations, is that the current guideline daily amounts that we have were seen not to be enough by the Department of Health in its quest to, get the obesity levels of South Africans down and control what they eat. And as such, they decided to pass new regulations in favor for front of packaging labeling for food, whereby there would be exclaimers or disclaimers, that is, or warnings for high sugar content foods or high fat content foods. So these regulations were released for comment by the Department of Health, which will mandate every food that is manufactured and packaged in South Africa to pretty much display the nutritional information in this manner that will be mandated by the Department of Health.
Okay, but as you said, food labeling is pretty normal. We're all used to it. So why should ordinary South Africans care about these new changes? Is there something to be worried about there that's kind of underneath the surface?
Ordinarily, as classical liberals and the government passing regulations telling businesses what and what not to do is generally frowned upon, and it should be. But with these new sets of regulations, there is a huge infringement on, firstly, the freedom of expression, right? The regulations themselves limit, for instance, professionals who want to endorse a particular food product from doing so, because they would be barred prior to them getting authorization from a board that will be created by these new regulations to pretty much authorize endorsements by professionals in the health sector, for instance, should a food have health benefits. So there's a freedom of expression infringement that's going to happen. And in general, for food manufacturers, right, who want to be able to write whatever it is that they claim their food does, but they would have to seek permission before doing that. And the Constitution is pretty clear on what types of speech are prohibited. And as long as their speech does not incite violence, then pretty much you are allowed to say it.
And having to seek permission from a regulator, that gives that regulator disproportionate power. And we could see a tightening up of those regulations in future and a real quashing of that free speech right. So it's not just individuals who have free speech rights, but these companies as well. And what other rights do you foresee being infringed here?
Oh, yes. The as I've hinted on it, the freedom of association, right? So that is guaranteed to every South African constitutionally. If you're a professional, your freedom to associate with a particular brand or product and endorse it will be infringed upon or heavily limited, because you'll first have to seek permission from this body that we just spoke about for you to endorse that particular product. And that is a unjustifiable infringement on the freedom of association, because, professionals, just like anyone else, should be free to endorse a particular product should they wish to.
All right, Zex, well, apart from some of the rights-based issues and concerns that you have, there's also the context of rampant and rising inflation. So inflation is now north of 7%. I think food inflation is even higher. That's at about 11% or so. So could this potentially accelerate or aggravate the already high food inflation that we're experiencing in South Africa?
Oh, it definitely will. It definitely will. An association of, food producers in South Africa, in an article that I was reading, they made a comment about the cost implications of changing their entire packaging processes, because with the passing of these regulations, there will be a point in time where if the food that is in shelves that is not displayed according to these regulations, then those companies will be liable criminally from the government. So for them to be able to comply with them, they would have to change their packaging, which would add a cost implication for consumers in South Africa that are already suffering, right? The Reserve Bank actually in their monetary policy review that they released last month was actually urging the government to do its part in not exacerbating inflationary pressures. And it mentioned deregulation, but in this instance, the government will be putting on an extra cost on food when South Africans are experiencing, as you said, double-digit food inflation, which is not a good thing.
All right, Zags. Well, what recommendations did you put forward in the submission to Parliament that we mentioned earlier? What would be a better alternative to these proposed regulations?
The alternative would be really sticking to the status quo. We currently do have guideline daily amounts that are displayed on food items, and if South Africans go to buy any food item, they will most likely see a display of the nutritional value of whatever is contained in that food item that they're buying. And I'm saying we should not be trying to, at the very least, most importantly, put on more costs on food at this particular time. The current guideline daily amounts, the argument from the department is that they do not go far enough in dissuading South Africans from buying unhealthy food. And I'm saying primarily that should not be the concern of a government to socially engineer its citizens to be healthy or not healthy. Really, it should provide them with, the rule of law and protect their property. But since it has decided to do this, and there is a currently existing, legislative regime, we should not be trying to change it in an effort to try and, further expand the government's social engineering ends. So let's just stick to the current status quo and, scrap the new proposed regulations.
Thanks very much, Zags. If you are interested in reading the FMF's submission to Parliament on these new food regulations, we've linked to those in the description below. Before you go, please don't forget to hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. That's it from me, David Ansara from the Free Market Foundation. Until next time, stay free.